When I first signed my contract with Helios Dynamics, I never imagined it would change the course of my life. Back then, we were just four people crammed inside an old warehouse on the outskirts of San Francisco, where the air smelled of chemicals, dust, and metal, the familiar scent of dreams still half formed. We worked among piles of broken solar cells, discarded components, and a whiteboard so crowded with equations that none of us could tell which line came first. My name is Eva Monroe, PhD in Materials Engineering, MIT graduate, with a thesis on nanostructures in solar energy cells. I once had offers from major corporations, but I chose another path, narrower, muddier, dimmer, because I wanted to create my own light. At Helios, we had nothing but faith. We believed that if we could make sunlight just 1% more efficient, the world would change. That belief became Lumicell, a solar cell built from composite nanomaterials that could store twice as much energy as traditional photovoltaic cells. No one believed it would work. We had only an outdated 3D printer, a small reactor I rebuilt myself, and leftover components from a bankrupt lab. But I believed, and I kept going. After 7 long months, the first prototype worked. A faint red glow came alive on the surface of the cell, and the whole room fell silent, as if witnessing a miracle. I still remember that day. It was raining lightly, water leaking through the window frame. I placed the tiny cell on the table and watched the needle on the energy meter move. In that moment, I knew I had touched something real. We named it Lumicell, a small light that would never go out. Months later, Helios secured its first contract with a clean energy company in Seattle. I didn't think much when I signed the papers. The agreement stated that all inventions belonged to the company. But David Tran, our CEO and my co founder, added one small, handwritten line in blue ink. Clause 12. In the event Helios undergoes a change of ownership or management without disclosure, all intellectual property rights will revert to the original inventor. I laughed and told him he was being overly cautious. Helios grew. We moved from the warehouse to a small sixth-floor office. New desks, cool air, the smell of strong coffee, little things that made it feel like progress. I spent most of my days in the lab, my sleeves coated with silver dust from conductive powder, my hair carrying the faint scent of ozone. I didn't care about corporate politics, press coverage, or investor decks. I only wanted to build something that would outlast me. David once told me, Eva, you're the heart of Helios. You're the reason this light exists. I laughed it off, but deep down I felt proud. However small, I believed I was contributing to the future. Years passed, and Helios began drawing serious investors. I watched meetings I wasn't invited to, contracts I wasn't asked to sign. I told myself it was just part of growth. Then, one afternoon, David leaned over during a board call and quietly said Helios was being acquired by a finance group from New York. His tone carried both pride and unease. I simply said, if it helps us bring more light to the world, I'm all for it. When the final signatures were done, I stood alone in the lab, watching sunlight stream through the thick glass, scattering across rows of lumicells lined neatly on the table. They glowed like miniature suns. I didn't know then that from that moment on, that same light would grow so bright it could burn the one who created it. I had always believed that light brings life. I never imagined it could also carry darkness. I still remember the first night Lumicell came to life, that small red glow reflected in my eyes like a promise. I didn't know that 10 years later, that same light would illuminate the faces of those trying to extinguish it, and mine when I finally decided I would not back down. If you're hearing this story now, tell me, where are you as you listen? In a dim office, on your way home, or in the middle of a sleepless night like I was back then? I want to know, because everyone has their own version of Helios, a place that once shone brightly, then slowly dimmed. And if you love stories about awakening, about standing up not with noise but with intellect, stay with me until the end, because this light has only just begun. I met Lucas Grant on a March morning, when the air in San Francisco still carried the scent of sea mist, and the sunlight wasn't strong enough to pierce the frosted glass of the conference room. He walked in, tall, in a perfectly tailored black suit, shoes polished to a mirror shine that caught the ceiling lights. His voice was deep, with measured pauses, as if every sentence had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. I'm Lucas Grant, the new Chief Executive Officer of Helios Dynamics, he said, then looked around the room with a confident smile, just enough to make everyone believe he was the one who would take Helios to the next level. David introduced him to me as though handing over a precious jewel to its rightful heir. Lucas is a man of vision, he said. He can help us double in scale within 2 years. I looked into David's eyes and caught a flicker of worry beneath his cheerful tone. He had always believed in technology, but he also knew that once money entered the room, the light of ideals began to dim. Lucas was charming. He shook my hand, tilting his head slightly, his gaze sharp, assessing every nuance of expression. Eva Monroe, he said, I've heard a lot about you. You're the soul of Helios, aren't you? I smiled and replied softly, I'm just someone who prefers being in the lab. He laughed, a laugh calculated to sound sincere without being too familiar. During his first week, Lucas visited every department, spoke with employees, and took notes on the iPad that never left his hand. He called it the internal culture observation phase. In one meeting, he stood by the board, sketching circles that represented growth, performance, and expansion. Not a single word about research or innovation. I realized that to him, light was only a number, but he knew how to win people over. He sent me a fountain pen engraved with the words, "To the woman who catches the sun." A token of appreciation, he said, for my contributions to Lumicell. I thanked him, though a trace of doubt flickered in me. People never give gifts without expecting something in return. A few weeks later, he invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant by the bay. I disliked those meetings, but I thought I owed him at least one meal to understand what he truly wanted. While I ordered a salad, he ordered white wine and spoke about expanding production into Europe, about standardizing intellectual property to make fundraising easier. Standardizing intellectual property, the phrase made me pause mid-bite. He continued, his tone casual. I just want to ensure that all core technologies belong to the company, to avoid legal risks. I'll send you the contract revision next week. Nothing major, just a formality. I asked, what kind of formality? He replied, just updating IP rights to align with the new corporate structure. Everything you create will still bear your name, but ownership will belong to Helios. That's standard practice. I said nothing. Inside, something sank, like a stone falling into deep water. When the draft arrived, I read every line. The structure was smooth, clever, but beneath the legal phrasing lay the truth. If I signed it, every invention I had made, including Lumicell, would belong entirely to the company, and I would be reduced to a senior technical developer. I didn't sign. I said I needed to consult my lawyer first. Lucas wasn't angry. He simply smiled. Being cautious is good, he said. But remember, opportunity doesn't wait. After that meeting, I began noticing changes in the way people spoke to me. Some meetings happened without my name on the schedule. Some projects were paused for strategic realignment. In the hallway, glances lingered, half respectful, half wary. David was almost never around, buried in meetings with Brightscale Capital, the new parent company. One afternoon, Lucas came to my lab. He looked around, admiring the Lumicells under testing. Impressive, he said. You know, Eva, I used to think sunlight was just a symbol, but seeing your work, I believe it's the future. I asked what he wanted for Helios. He said, I want to put Helios on the world map, but to do that we need discipline, order, and clear ownership. I know you're smart, and I trust you'll stand with me. I looked him straight in the eye. I stand with the light, I said. He smiled, thin and sharp as a blade. We're on the same side, Eva. The only difference is who holds the switch. I didn't reply. But when he left, I knew something had changed, not in Helios, in me. A chill crept in, as if the light in the lab had just shifted color. From that day on, I began to notice my shadow stretching longer across the concrete floor. Not because the sun was lower, but because the light itself was being controlled by someone else. I began to realize the change was no longer just a feeling. It had shape, scent, and rhythm. A thick kind of silence drifted through Helios, where people spoke less, smiled more awkwardly, and conversations always seemed to stop the moment I walked into a room. One morning, I opened the internal meeting calendar. It used to be filled with discussions on research, testing, and performance optimization. Now, the list was empty. Some of the strategic product meetings, I noticed, had been moved to Brightscale Executive Session without my name on them. I sent an email asking why and received a polite, short reply: not currently necessary for the research division. Lucas began cutting budgets. First, the material ordered from our Japanese supplier slashed in half, with the excuse that the cost was too high for the projected profit margin. Then, the Lumacell 2.1 project was postponed indefinitely to focus on the commercial line. I knew what that meant: sell what we already had instead of creating something new. Fast profit, low risk. But Helios was never built for that. Two young engineers from my team, Mia and Raphael, were reassigned to a new unit called the Innovation Pod, founded by Lucas himself. I only found out when I entered the lab and saw their desks empty, coffee cups still half full, their names erased from the project board. When I asked human resources, they said the decision came from the executive office. I wasn't angry or sad, I just recorded it. I opened the small notebook I always carried and began noting the dates, times, and details of every change, every canceled meeting, every deleted budget line, every shift in procedure. I logged them all. I knew I couldn't fight Lucas with emotion. He spoke the language of power. If I wanted to survive, I had to speak the language of evidence. That evening, I called Nadia Torres. We had studied together at MIT. She was now an intellectual property attorney at an aerospace firm. We still talked occasionally, but this was the first time I called her with such a heavy tone. I think Helios is preparing to strip me of my patent, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Do you still have the original contract? I have a scanned copy and the digital file with David's signature. I also remember he handwrote a clause about ownership in case the company changed hands. That clause might be your lifeline, Nadia said, but don't do anything yet. Let them move first. You need to let them make the mistake. What do you think I should do? I asked. Document everything. Every action that could prove they're trying to alter the original terms without your consent, and start backing up your data. So I did. Every line of Lumacell's code, every research file, every test video, I moved them all to a private server. I didn't trust the company drives or the new cloud share system Lucas insisted we use. I encrypted all the data with a personal key, a string of characters only. Nadia and I knew. She also showed me how to register blockchain timestamps for each file to prove original ownership in case of a dispute. I knew I was stepping into dangerous territory, but I had no other choice. A few weeks later, Lucas held an all-hands meeting. He stood on stage beneath the new Helios logo, a stylized sun, sharp and symmetrical, nothing like the hand-drawn emblem David once painted on the lab wall. He spoke about Helios 2.0, about speed, precision, efficiency. I stood in the back row, listening to him speak, feeling like I was hearing a foreign language. When the meeting ended, Lucas spotted me, walked over, and placed a hand on my shoulder, a friendly gesture. Eva, I know you've got a lot on your plate, but remember, every system needs updates. Otherwise, it gets left behind. I looked at him and said quietly, and sometimes it's the update that makes the system collapse. He smiled, said nothing. But in that brief moment, his eyes stopped smiling. In the days that followed, I was almost entirely removed from the core operations. The project I had founded was reassigned to another team. My title changed from lead engineer to senior technical advisor, a name that sounded important but carried no authority. I lost my office, my team, and was left with a small desk in the corner of the lab where old equipment used to be stored. Still, I showed up every day. I knew silence was the only way to keep them from realizing I was preparing. One evening, when the building was nearly empty, I stayed behind in the lab. The light from the lumicells reflected off the metal tables, soft, golden, painfully beautiful. I thought of the early days, when everything was just fragments of a dream. I wondered if David knew what was happening, or if he had chosen silence to protect his share. I turned off the lights, leaving only a faint glow from one small cell running its test cycle. The room sank into a haze of warmth and cold. They thought my silence meant fear. It didn't. I was only waiting for the storm to come, because in the middle of a storm, the light always shines clearly. I knew the storm was coming, but I never expected it to strike so fast and so loud. That morning, Helios sent out an email titled Company-Wide Meeting. Quarter 2 Restructuring Strategy. Location: the boardroom on the 21st floor, a place I'd barely set foot in since Lucas took over. No one explained the details, but the air in the office felt strange. People spoke softly, avoided each other's eyes, and tension hummed in the air like a live wire about to snap. I arrived a few minutes late. The door was closed, the room washed in cold light reflecting off the polished wooden table. Lucas stood at the head, surrounded by a few new faces from the executive team, people I'd never seen before. In the center of the table sat a silver paper shredder. He smiled when I entered. "Eva, perfect timing," he said. "We were just discussing Helios's intellectual property ownership." His tone was polite, smooth, but every word carried something hard and cold underneath. I sat down without speaking. Lucas glanced around the table, waiting for the room to fall silent like an actor before his monologue. "Helios is entering a new phase," he said, "and to ensure legal transparency, we're eliminating outdated documents that no longer have any binding authority, a part of the past." He turned, picked up a stack of papers, and I recognized it instantly, even at a glance. My first contract. The one I signed with David in that cramped room 10 years ago. The one with his handwritten note in Clause 12. The lower right corner still bore the faint coffee stain I'd spilled that day. My heart pounded, but my face stayed still. Lucas held the paper up and smiled. "Here it is, the legacy of our early days. A contract with no legal value under current law, but a symbol of where we came from. I think it's time we say goodbye." He walked to the shredder and fed the page in. The blades began to spin, slow and metallic. Every time he pushed another inch of paper through, I could hear the rasp of it tearing, sharp and deliberate. No one spoke. Some lowered their heads. Others pretended to check their phones. I kept my eyes fixed on him. Lucas paused, tilted his head slightly, savoring the moment. "You've had quite a journey, Eva," he said. "But Helios needs new energy, new ideas, new people. You understand, don't you?" I replied evenly, "I do. And I hope you understand what you've just done." He chuckled. "Don't worry, everything's backed up properly. This is just a formality." I looked at him for one more second, then stood. "Formality," I repeated softly. "You're right. Good thing I don't believe in formalities." I left the room. No one said a word as I passed. Only the sound of the shredder followed me, steady, cold, mechanical, like a machine's heartbeat. I don't remember how long I walked. When I came to, I was standing on the 19th floor balcony. The sea wind caught my hair, the scent of ozone and steel drifting through every breath. I inhaled deeply. I wasn't angry or sad. I just felt calm, the kind of calm that comes when you know a battle is coming and you're ready for it. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and logged into my private security system. I checked every blockchain record Nadia had helped me register. The original contract, with both the handwritten and digital signatures, was stored with timestamp and independent ID verification. Every patent I'd filed, from Lumicell to the later module designs, was clearly marked. Eva Monroe, original inventor. The company held only a usage license, with one clause stated plainly: in case of unlawful termination, ownership automatically reverts to the inventor. I reread that line, then saved it to my offline drive. The blue glow from the screen lit my face, outlining the dark circles beneath my eyes. The next morning, an internal email from Helios announced structural changes. My name was at the bottom of the list, followed by one line: Eva Monroe. Research collaboration terminated effective immediately. No call, no meeting with HR, no farewell. Just a few cold sentences from an automated system. I looked at the screen and clicked to save a copy. Lucas might have thought he'd erased a piece of the past, but what he didn't realize was that in that very moment, he tore open the thin fabric covering a bomb he couldn't see. I put on my coat and stepped outside. The morning sun hit the brick pavement, so bright it was almost blinding. I squinted, then smiled. They thought they'd extinguish the light, but they forgot one thing. Light doesn't disappear. It only reflects in another direction. And this time, it's going straight toward them. I stopped going into the office. The next morning, I woke early, made a strong black coffee, and sat quietly watching through the window. The city buzzed like always. People commuting, laughing, arguing about little things that nobody remembers for long. But inside me, something had gone dark. Not the light of the work, but the light of trust. Around 10 a.m., I called Nadia Torres. She answered after 2 rings. That thing already happened, I said. She did not ask what thing. She exhaled softly and asked, "What did he do?" "I was fired," I said. "In front of the board. He tore up my original contract and said it had no value." There was a few seconds of silence on the line. I heard a pen tap the desk. "You still have the digital copy?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "The original with the handwritten signature and the blockchain notarization are all intact." Her voice went serious. "Good," she said. "Then he just shot himself in the foot. We met at the little coffee shop where we used to study, the glass a little cloudy, the wooden tables worn, the smell of roasted beans exactly the same. I arrived early with my laptop and an external drive. When Nadia walked in, she looked at me without saying a word and nodded. "Show me," she said. I opened my laptop and displayed the original contract. She skimmed the clauses and then stopped at clause 12. David's handwriting from years ago. "Here," she said, pointing to the line that read, "In case Helios undergoes a change of ownership or terminates a key research employee without supplementary agreement, all invention rights, patents, and intellectual property shall revert to the original inventor." She looked up at me. "This clause, Eva, is valid," she said. "And Lucas shredding the paper in the meeting was not only an insult, but it was also evidence of wrongful conduct." I whispered, "I know. He thought I only had that paper copy." Nadia sat quietly for a moment, then took out a pen. "I will prepare a breach of contract notice," she said. "But first, you must ensure all patents are properly tied to you as the original inventor. Signatures, identification codes, and timestamps are all in place." "I have everything," I said. "I prepared this when Lucas started cutting budgets. He does not know, but I registered the core copyrights of Lumicell in my personal repository. The company only has usage rights under the old agreement." Nadia smiled. "You are 2 moves ahead," she said. "Now just wait for them to fall in." "What is the plan?" I asked. "First send the breach of contract notice," she said. "Not directly to Lucas, but to the internal legal department, with the board copied. When they see the implications, they will panic. Then you will temporarily suspend access to Lumicell's core systems. No deletion, just an operational lock, so they cannot use the technology without your authorization. When the production line stops, they will have to call." "Is that the first strike?" I asked. "No," she said evenly. "It is a reminder. The real strike comes when they try to hide this from investors." I was quiet. In my head, I saw Lucas at the shredder, strips of paper falling and turning into meaningless confetti. Now I understand those strips did not erase anything. They only etched his name into the list of mistakes that cannot be undone. "What if they fight back?" I asked Nadia. "We go legal," she said. "You have the contract, blockchain-proof timestamps, and witnesses. If needed, I will extract metadata for every patent. You will not only regain ownership, you will claim the revenue tied to it." I smiled softly. "I do not want money," I said. "I know," she replied, her eyes softening. "But maybe this time, money is the only language they will understand." I looked out the window. Afternoon light slanted across the table and painted my coffee cup a band of gold. I thought about the years at Helios, the long nights, the burnt smell of components, the hum of fans, and the first glow of Lumicell. I felt no regret. I felt it was time to take back what was mine. Before we left the cafe, Nadia warned quietly, "When they lose control, they will call you. When they do not respond immediately. Let them be afraid." That night, I returned to my small workspace. I opened the test control system and entered the security key that only I know. The screen displayed, "Access control override is active," I confirmed. The entire Lumicell simulation system is locked down to accept access from one device only, mine. I sat and watched the words, "Secure mode enabled," light up, and then I smiled. Lucas cut me out of Helios. He did not know that when he burned that page, he only destroyed a copy. The real thing lives where he can never reach it, in the law, in the data, and in the memories of those who first saw that light. I took a sip of coffee and checked the clock, which read 11 o'clock at night. The city outside still glowed while I, the person who had made the light, sat in the dark, waiting for it to shine back. No revenge needed, no fanfare. I only need them to burn down the house they built with my sweat. That fire I have already lit. 3 days after I activated the security protocol, Helios began to leak panic. The first sign came from a former engineer on my old team. He messaged me in the middle of the night. "The system isn't running. Lumicore won't respond. Production is in chaos." I looked at the message and didn't reply. The next day, an internal Helios report surfaced on a technical forum and was leaked to the public. Access failure in the energy coordination module. Production line for Lumicell is operational. Investors started asking questions. The media smelled blood. Lucas reacted like a man drowning in the storm he created. He called an emergency meeting, showed up in an expensive suit with a stiff smile, and spoke about a minor technical issue and a temporary transition to a new system. But anyone who knew engineering understood there was no minor issue that could shut down a multi-million-dollar production line. That evening, Helios released a statement. "A former employee has seized system access, disrupting operations. We are cooperating with authorities to investigate." I read that line on my phone while pouring coffee and laughed quietly. They called me a former employee. The phrase was both true and not. I liked it, because they didn't understand that former doesn't mean powerless. 2 hours later, social media exploded. From a bland corporate statement, the story turned into a wildfire. A genius engineer was robbed of her invention. Helios loses its technological soul. A well-known tech blogger dug up old filings and found that the Lumicell patent was under my name, complete with blockchain registration proving it. The news spread faster than any PR campaign could ever hope to. The hashtag she owns the sun began trending. Lucas countered. He hired a major PR firm to flood the internet with headlines accusing me of stealing trade secrets and betraying the company that gave me my start. But what he didn't understand was that in this era, people don't believe whoever shouts the loudest. They believe whoever has proof. 3 days later, a producer from CNN called. They wanted me on Innovation Tonight with my attorney. Nadia told me to accept. "You don't need to attack them," she said. "Just tell the truth." Before the show, I sat in the makeup room staring into the mirror. The woman looking back at me, hair neatly tied, eyes shadowed but steady, was no longer the quiet engineer from the lab. She was the one who had created the light and was now defending it. The host asked, "Miss Monroe, did you actually lock Helios out of its own technology?" I answered, "No. I only activated the security mechanism I designed to prevent misuse. The system responds only to those with legal access. And according to the original contract, that's me. Don't you think your actions might cost hundreds of jobs? I think the people who broke the agreement are the ones responsible for those jobs, not the one who kept her promise." The interview aired live. My answer spread, online within hours, shared millions of times. Lucas couldn't stop the wave. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I just watched in silence. Each day, the stock price of Helios fell further. Every tweet, every headline chipped away at the only thing they valued: investor confidence. 3 days after the interview, Nadia sent me a copy of a leaked internal email. In it, Helios's legal department admitted they had found no evidence contradicting Eva Monroe's intellectual property ownership under the original clause. One sentence. That was all it took. But Lucas still refused to concede. He hired a cybersecurity firm to break into my system. I found traces of unauthorized login attempts in the access logs from an internal Helios IP address. I didn't report it. I simply documented it, time-stamped it, and sent a copy to Nadia. That night, Lucas called me on video. I had been expecting it. He looked at me through the screen, his smile tight. "Eva, you're taking this too far. I'm just protecting what's mine, I said. You're hurting the company, the people who believed in you. I'm not burning the house, I said. I'm just locking the door so they can't steal again. He said nothing and ended the call. Later, I heard Lucas held a closed board meeting. Someone from inside sent me a short recording. His voice hurried, trembling slightly. We need to regain control of this technology. If she wins, Helios will collapse. I replayed that line, not for satisfaction, but to remember it. Because a man only says that when he already knows he's losing. That night, Nadia called. It's time to send the official notice, she said. I've prepared everything. Breach of contract, I asked. An activation of the reversion clause, she said. Once it's filed, all 34 patents will revert to you, legally and permanently. I looked at the screen in front of me. The lines of code pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Send it, I said. A confirmation appeared. The signed PDF with timestamps, blockchain IDs, and the list of 34 patents had been delivered to Helios's legal department. I turned off the monitor and leaned back in my chair. Outside, rain traced down the glass, reflecting the city lights. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of rain mixing with my heartbeat, steady, calm. Lucas thought he was fighting to save the company. He didn't realize the war had ended long ago, the moment he fed that paper into the shredder. He wasn't defending Helios anymore. He was only running from the light he himself had awakened. 3 days after Nadia sent the breach of contract notice, Helios began to crumble for real. I didn't need anyone to tell me. The news said everything. Company stock dropped 17% in one day. Partners suspended contracts. A major investor in Berlin announced they were reevaluating Helios's ownership of its core intellectual property. All because of one email. Lucas still hadn't reached out. He stayed silent, but I knew he was seething. Men like him don't survive the taste of losing control. On the fourth day, Nadia called. They want a face-to-face, she said. Not just Lucas, the entire board. I guessed what they wanted. Negotiation. Exactly, Nadia said. But remember, Ava, you're not the one who needs to compromise. They're the ones begging. We met at Helios headquarters. The same building, the same conference room, the same table where Lucas had torn up my contract. I wore a white shirt, a black jacket, and carried a slim leather folder. No lawyer, no bodyguard, just me, and the papers bearing their own signatures. When I walked in, the air felt heavy as lead. Board members avoided my eyes. Lucas stood at the head of the table, his arrogance gone. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. He forced a smile. Ava, thank you for coming. We're all adults here. I'm sure we can find a reasonable solution for both sides. I sat down. Reasonable solution, I repeated. What exactly does that mean? He glanced at a silver-haired man beside him, the company's new attorney. The lawyer spoke. We acknowledge that the ownership clause in your original contract is valid. However, Helios wishes to retain usage rights to the technology through a new licensing agreement. In return, you would receive a substantial payment. I leaned back. How substantial? $7 million plus fixed royalties for 3 years. I looked at Lucas. He couldn't meet my gaze. I placed my folder on the table. 7 million, I said slowly. You know, that was the same number I proposed for a licensing agreement 6 months ago, when I was still with the company, and you turned it down. Lucas's jaw tightened. Times have changed, Eva. You're costing hundreds of people their jobs. You once called Helios your family. I smiled faintly. Family? Families don't tear up contracts in front of a boardroom. Families don't steal work and call their creator a threat. A woman on the board, the same gray-haired member who had sat beside Lucas the day he fired me, spoke up. Eva, surely you understand business sometimes means conflict. You can't hold all 34 patents yourself. We can raise the offer, 10 million, 20, if necessary. I looked around the table. My voice was calm, but carried through the silence. I didn't come here to bargain. I came to the end of this. The room went still. I remembered Nadia's words. True power isn't in who shouts the loudest. It's in who makes others afraid to speak. I opened my folder and placed 2 documents on the table. The first, I said, is a new licensing contract. You can sign it now. $7 million plus 25% of net profit from any product using my technology, valid for 5 years, renewable only with my consent. Any further breach, and usage rights are permanently revoked. I tapped the second file. The second is a transfer agreement, if I choose to sell all rights to another company, and I already have 3 offers waiting. One of the board members spoke, voice trembling. You wouldn't really do that, would you? I said. I will if I have to. Lucas rose, his tone rising with him. You're blackmailing this company. I turned to him, my gaze cold. No, Lucas, I'm assigning value to the truth. You're the one who lost it. Silence filled the room. I heard a pen tap against the table, followed by a long sigh. Finally, one board member said, We need to discuss privately. I stood. I'll wait outside. The hallway was long and quiet. I walked slowly, watching the rain through the glass wall, neon lights reflected across the wet street. It looked exactly like the morning he fired me, except this time I was the one in control. I sat in the waiting area for nearly an hour. When the conference door opened, a young assistant stepped out, holding the signed documents. Miss Monroe, she said softly, they've agreed. I took the papers and flipped through them. Lucas's signature, the board's. The ink is still fresh, and at the bottom, confirmation of payment, $7 million, to be wired today. I thanked her and walked away. No one stopped me. No one said a word. In the lobby, I paused before the glass wall, my reflection staring back. There was no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet peace, as if a door had closed and locked the past behind it forever. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed bright, and I realized I no longer needed Helios to create light. I was the light. That evening, Nadia called, her voice soft, like we'd both just stepped out of a storm. You know, Eva, she said, they'll remember you for a long time. I laughed lightly. I don't need them to remember, I said. I just need them to pay on time. But deep down, I knew Lucas wouldn't let it rest. He wasn't built to live with failure, especially not when the person who beat him was me. And I knew the story wasn't over, because in the game of power, the defeated only disappear once they stop believing they can still win. And Lucas hadn't learned that lesson yet. 3 weeks after the signing, I thought everything was finally over. Helios went quiet. The headlines shifted to other stories. I spent my days at home, reorganizing my workspace, restoring old blueprints, ideas that had never been given a chance to live. Life felt strangely peaceful, almost foreign. But silence is always the last breath before the wind turns. One evening, Nadia called, her voice urgent. Eva, have you seen the news? I opened my laptop and my heart sank. On Tech Radar's front page, whistleblower claims Lumicell inventor stole proprietary data before leaving Helios. The article was written with surgical precision, no direct accusations, but enough to plant doubt. Sources inside the company claimed I had copied confidential data, tampered with blockchain records, and faked ownership of Lumicell. Helios, it said, was cooperating with authorities. I recognized the PR signature immediately, Caro and Mason Media, the same firm Lucas had used. He's fighting back, I said. He is, Nadia replied, and this time he's playing dirty. They don't need to win. They just need you to look like a liar. Investors will hesitate. Partners will pull out. She was right. Within 2 days, a robotics firm in Seattle emailed to say they were pausing negotiations due to legal uncertainty. An investor in Boston canceled our meeting. A well-known tech blogger deleted their supportive post, replacing it with a single line. Maybe the story isn't as simple as we thought. Lucas wasn't attacking head-on. He was doing what he did best, manipulating perception. Nadia called for an emergency meeting. Do you want to file for defamation? She asked. I shook my head. No. If I react, it'll look like fear. I need something definitive. That night, I reopened my old archive, the full history of Lumicell's development. Every line of code, every experiment report, every lab note, all time-stamped and signed by the people involved. Among them was a recording from a 2017 internal meeting, back before Lucas ever arrived. In it, David, the founding director, said clearly, every invention by Eva belongs to her personally. The company only holds usage rights by contract. Exactly what I needed. Nadia helped compile the evidence into a media file, not for journalists, but for one person. Griffin Marks, senior partner at the law firm representing Helios. The same man who had called Nadia during our first legal battle. When he received the file, it came with only one note. Check your client's facts before you defend the wrong side. 3 days later, Helios abruptly pulled the entire PR campaign. The article vanished. No apology, no statement, just silence. I knew what had happened. Griffin was a lawyer first, and when he saw the original evidence, he must have realized Helios was digging its own grave. For a moment, it felt calm again. But Lucas still wasn't done. One night, as I worked in my office, my window monitor flashed. Someone was trying to access my code remotely. The IP trace pointed straight back to Helios headquarters. I didn't shut it down. I let them in. I had prepared a trap, a decoy dataset encrypted to look like the new Lumicell design. The moment they opened it, it triggered a tracker that logged every IP, timestamp, and user credential involved. The next morning, I sent the report to Nadia. She read it and said quietly, "They just bankrupted themselves." "What will you do with it?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "I'll forward it to their auditors. When the board learns that Lucas attempted unauthorized access to protected data, he'll be suspended before he can explain." And she was right. 2 days later, Helios issued a short statement. The CEO takes a leave of absence for personal reasons. Everyone who understood the industry knew what that meant. He'd been removed from the board. I thought I'd feel satisfied. Instead, I felt hollow. No victory could fill the 10 years I'd lost. I didn't hate Lucas. I pitied him for believing power came from signatures, not intellect. A few days later, Nadia called with new news. A global renewable energy group wanted to acquire all 34 of my patents, not just to use them, but to integrate them into an international project. They said, she told me, they want technology led by women, by someone who stood for justice when the system turned its back. I was silent for a long time. Then I asked, and Helios? "They'll have to license it from this company if the deal closes," Nadia said. "In other words, they'll pay to use what they once thought they owned." I sat quietly, sunlight spilling across my desk, scattering over the steel surface. The broken pieces of my past finally fit together, not for revenge, but for closure. "I agree," I said. Nadia didn't answer, just exhaled softly, relief in her breath. I knew that after everything, this was no longer about winning or losing. It was about justice. As for Lucas, he didn't yet realize that in my world, where every line of code and every clause is recorded, there's no such thing as personal reasons. Everything leaves a timestamp, and in the end, time always delivers its verdict. 1 year later, I woke to sunlight reflecting off the lake, slipping through the glass, and scattering across the wooden ceiling. The little house in Vermont still smelled of pine and fresh coffee. Since signing with Aurora Energy, the renewable group that had purchased all 34 of my patents, I had almost forgotten my Helios inbox existed. Once in a while, Nadia would still send short updates, more factual than emotional. Lucas is officially under internal investigation. Helios just merged with a smaller firm. All technologies linked to Lumicell now require Aurora's approval. Each line felt like a period at the end of an old chapter. I would read them, smile faintly, then close the message without replying. Work was no longer a race against time. No more windowless labs, no more endless meetings debating whether rebranding counted as strategy. At Aurora, they cared only about results and about how technology could serve humanity. I led a small team of 6 people, 3 engineers, 2 researchers, and 1 recent graduate from MIT. They called me Dr. Monroe, but I preferred Eva. Lumicell was no longer just a solar battery. It had become the foundation for emergency medical power systems. In remote areas where electricity was unstable, our cells kept incubators running through the night, oxygen machines breathing through the dark. For the first time in years, I felt that what I had built was truly alive. One afternoon in October, Nadia came to visit. She looked the same, long coat, sharp eyes, that familiar half-smile. We sat on the porch, the air sweet with ripe apples from the garden next door. "You heard the news?" she asked, taking a sip of coffee. Depends which one you mean, I said. Lucas Grant. He officially left Helios. The board announced it this morning. Personal reasons again. I smiled. So he finally got some real rest. Nadia set down her cup, studying me. You are not satisfied. I thought you would want to hear him admit he was wrong. I shook my head. He already did, just not with words. We fell silent. The wind rustled through the pines. The water lapped softly against the dock. I used to think, I said quietly, that revenge was the only way to restore balance. But it turns out justice does not need anger to exist. It shows up the moment you stop chasing it. Nadia smiled. So what is next for you? I want to create something no one can buy, something that does not just make a profit but saves lives. She nodded. Then you have found your light again. I turned toward the lake. The water mirrored a clear blue sky, and for the first time in a long while, I felt weightless. No anger, no regret, just calm, and the quiet certainty that I was still moving in the right direction. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Not from Helios, not from investors, just a thin envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet, written in a familiar hand. Eva. I once believed I could control the light. Now I understand it never belongs to anyone. It only shines on those who have the courage to face it. L. I folded the letter and set it by the window. No anger, no forgiveness, just a final punctuation mark. That evening, I sat outside, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The lake glowed orange and gold, waves catching the last of the light. I closed my eyes and breathed in deep. 15 years, from that small crowded lab to this quiet shore, the light had never left me. But now I no longer needed to hold on to it. I had become it. Helios might fall. My name might fade. But the light, the one I created, would still shine somewhere. In a rural hospital. In a small home in Africa. In the hands of someone who had never heard of Eva Monroe. And that, I thought, is the real victory. When night came, I went inside and turned off the lamps, letting the moonlight spill through the window and cover everything in soft silver. No more contracts, no more boardrooms, no more accusations. Just me and the light. And this time, it belonged to me for good. I sat there watching the moon ripple on the lake, thinking about how far I had come, from the darkness of betrayal to the freedom of clarity. Maybe we all have a Helios of our own, a place where we once gave everything, only to learn how to stand again after it broke. What matters is not what we lose, but how we find ourselves afterward. And you, what moment in this story spoke to you the most? Was it when she was betrayed, or when she walked away smiling, choosing peace over revenge? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment you leave, and if you love stories about justice, the quiet, brilliant kind, where the powerless still win without ever raising their voice, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. There are more stories waiting, where the light always finds its way home. Thank you for listening.